Waiting for it to switch.
All righty, it's 4 o'clock. If everybody will find their seats, we'll go ahead and get started for this joint city-county school board discussion about CiCo Park. Everybody's supposed to have 20 minutes, so who is leading the city's discussion?
I will, Mayor.
Oh, there we go, on Zoom.
Take the nice seats.
Yep.
Ron, you're up.
Yeah, no, we have a
Thank you,
timekeeper,
Mayor.
minutes, he's gotta keep track, and then he will, do you want minutes notice, when you got 1 minute left? Yeah.
Yeah, Ron, so pay attention. At some point Clancy will tell you to stop talking.
All right. Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Wanted to just kind of give an overview of where the city is. Just also wanted to acknowledge that certainly I think CiCo Park's been a unique parcel and park over the years. Even though 3 different entities own the park, I believe there's always been good cooperation over the year with regard to various improvements and amenities in the park, certainly that have been located there. One of the things that the city will be focusing on here in the near term, they recall that we did have a ballot initiative in November of 2017 that...
Ron?
Yes.
Do you want to try and do that mic switch again? We're getting a little feedback. I'm not sure if this is the...
Is that better?
Try again?
Is that better?
Yes.
All right. So we had a ballot initiative in 2017 where voters approved 2 new recreation centers, Eisenhower and Anthony, and also some improvements to the city ball fields and tennis courts and some of the trails in CiCo Park. And so we've done the 2 rec centers, and now we're starting to focus on the improvements to the city's portion of CiCo Park. And certainly that's what we've created a steering committee to help guide that effort. And we look forward to working with folks to bring those improvements about. And I think we've got about $8.5 million identified that would be available for those improvements to the ball fields and also the tennis courts. And I just, the commission is certainly that's been the primary focus moving forward. And if we will need certainly cooperation from the school district relative to the tennis courts, as that's where they're located. But if there are other peripheral improvements on some of those edges that other commissioners and governing body interests are involved, we're certainly open to input on those, keeping in mind that we're pretty well relegated to the ballot initiative for the expenditure of those identified funds, at least for now. So with that, I turn to Wyatt Thompson in the room and ask Wyatt to kind of give an update on where we stand with the steering committee and those projects moving forward.
All right, thank you, Ron. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Board of Education members. Wyatt Thompson, Assistant City Manager. I presented a few times in different contexts to these different bodies about our project, but just as a reminder, the city is working with BHS Construction and Bruce McMillan Architects to evaluate and update our concepts that we developed for CiCo Park back in 2017. Just making sure that our assumptions back then are still accurate as we head into 2023 and 24. We originally had $8.5 million budgeted for the project. The sales tax has performed well, and we're anticipating $10 million is available now for the total project, with our goal, as Ron said, to improve the ball fields, the tennis courts, and then the related infrastructure that will support those different facilities and the uses that will occur there, which would be anything from parks and recreation activities and games, Manhattan High athletics, community use, leagues, tournaments, a whole variety of things that we imagine will be able to occur at those improved athletic facilities. We've had a number of stakeholder meetings over the past month. We've met with city's Parks and Recreation staff, Manhattan High athletics staff, Riley County staff, Visit Manhattan, and the Manhattan Area Sports Council, which is a group of stakeholders that they convene on a regular basis. Our team is meeting right now with the Parks and Recreation Foundation to get their input, and I believe we're still working on meeting with some of our sport league and tournament organizers to get their perspectives. The City Commission has also appointed a 15-member advisory steering committee, including a representative from Riley County and USD 383, as well as at-large members and the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, to provide input into the project. We've had our first meeting on October 18th, and really at that meeting provided kind of an overview of the project, some of the history, how we got to this point, and then started discussion about some of the features and amenities that the committee thought would be important to include in the project. Our next meeting will be held November 9th. That's at 6 p.m. at Anthony Recreation Center. They are open public meetings, and we'll be diving a little bit more into the details of the site, the grading, some of the challenges. We've already talked about ownership and all those things at the first meeting, but just kind of next steps with that committee will be on November the 9th. And then we intend to meet monthly with that committee through the spring of 2024 to continue those discussions and dive into concepts, ultimately looking for a recommendation from that committee to the City Commission on what we should include in the project, the layout, the different features and amenities. And then through that process, we intend to update the Board of County Commissioners and the Board of Education, as well as our City Commission at various points through that process. And that's still to be determined a little bit how and at what points in the process we need to have those conversations. But we're very open to providing updates, either written or at your meetings, in order to keep you up to speed on what's happening with the committee's work and our consultants' work. Ultimately, our goal is to get to May of 2024, where we'll be asking the City Commission to accept a guaranteed maximum price proposal from BHS Construction for the project, and then authorize that Phase 2 construction contract, which would begin mid-24 through 2025, with the facilities opening in 2026. As we move through the process and finalize that scope, we would envision agreements may be necessary with either the school district or the county for shared use, for construction easements or access or permanent easements, and exactly what those look like, I can't say today. I think that's one of those things we'll work through and keep you informed of as we move through the process, and then ultimately work with you all to hopefully execute whatever those agreements may or may not need to be as we get closer to that Phase 2 time period. So with that, I'll open it up for city commissioners or others to have discussion.
So BHS is involved in all these meetings early on, so they can help kind of factor in the prices of some of these ideas that they're having at the time.
That's correct.
And we've got somebody there with the civil engineering trying to determine the rainwater runoff and make sure we're not creating more issues with that, correct?
Yes, Schwab Eaton is our civil engineer, landscape architect, member of the team. And yeah, they're evaluating grading and stormwater management. Obviously, there's a major tributary that runs through the park, existing detention basins that we worked with the county and the school district on several years ago to construct, to minimize flooding and erosion downstream. And so our goal will be to maintain or improve those aspects of the detention and stormwater management with this project.
And you said the city's part of the CiCo ball fields stops not very far west of the current ball fields. I think Ron talked about Candlewood extended, so most all of that rock parking lot west of the ball fields is county.
That is correct.
Okay, and all right, those are mostly for clarification. I knew all that information.
And just on that point, Mayor, the 2017 concepts did show parking improvements, further west than that city-county line into the areas on the county property. We had discussions in 2017 about that and whether or not that would be feasible or appropriate or desirable. As we have continued conversations here in 2023 with stakeholders, we understand that it may not be desirable to improve or pave parking much beyond, beyond the city's line at all. We understand there's different fairground uses, different agricultural type uses that occur, and the county can speak to that more specifically. But I think we're open to wherever that line needs to be drawn of the improvement, if it makes sense just on the city's property, if it makes sense to do something on the county's property, we're open, but we're not obligated to what we showed in 2017 in terms of the limits of that pavement. And we're open to working with the county on what that looks like.
Very good. All right, questions?
Yeah, Wyatt, I'd like to just ask where, and this is a pretty fast timeline, and the Parks and Rec master plan is much longer. How does this fit in at all with the Parks and Rec master plan that we're just getting underway?
So I believe that the Parks and Recreation master plan will be actually following this fairly closely. I think they're coming back with recommendations by the summer.
Okay.
So we would seek to execute our phase 2 construction agreement before you had the final report. But that master plan is looking holistically at the entire department, at the Discovery Center, at indoor aquatics, at all of the parks and programs and different. And so I think that study will need to factor in that this park at CiCo will have 4 new ball fields and 12 new tennis courts, and factor that into the overall city inventory as they make recommendations for either new facilities, renovated facilities, new programs that could occur. I think this project just becomes part of that inventory because it is voter driven. We do have a mandate to construct these improvements based on the 2017 vote.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for city? Look at that, we'll give back 9 minutes. All right, we'll move on to the school district's presentation here. I have to leave in 10 minutes, so it's nothing you said, I'm just gonna leave anyway. So, Eric Reed,
Yeah.
Superintendent.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make it through your presentation. You won't walk out on me. I won't make it 20 minutes. You know, the school portion of CiCo Park, first of all, appreciate the cooperation between the county and the city, because where the school district sits is on borough ground right in the middle. I'm going to kind of use the computer to kind of show our piece of it. And where we're interested in CiCo Park, as far as where this happens, unsure, but want to explore. What we'd really like to do is consolidate facilities into one place. So the baseball and softball end, as well as tennis, being at CiCo would be ideal for us on an administrative level. And being able to host regional sub-states. I believe the tennis courts, the 12 tennis courts, would make it a viable state host, which brings people in multiple days, multiple overnights. Definitely could host many tournaments along the way. Baseball, softball, because the school district does not have their own fields. We've been utilizing Annenberg Park, or we've been utilizing Norval, as well as the fields out of Eisenhower, based on past agreements and other agreements. So we haven't had that for a long time, so being able to consolidate that into one area would be ideal. But so outside of the baseball, tennis facility as well, and where this happens, I think we just want to be open to the discussion. But for our track and field program, and I don't know if people realize, but our track and field program, 10% of the kids, Manhattan High track and field team. That's a really high percentage when you're talking about a 2,000 student school. So we have roughly 250, 260 kids that'll go out for track. Some of those run, some of those throw. And right now at that stadium, Bishop Stadium, our throwing is probably the most concerning because we're on borrowed, and I appreciate the cooperation because we currently do most of our throwing up here in this field, which is county area. So we've had that agreement with the county, kind of working with them on that. But because it's not ours and because there's other uses during the year, we really can't do anything permanent. And I hear some clamoring from my patrons about something permanent for those throwing areas. And it's not responsible for us, nor should we even ask. If it's not our property, we don't control it to do something permanent along the way. But I think we would be interested in doing that because I do believe we have an elite level, state level 6A track and field team in both boys and girls. So having a safe area for throwers. So we'll consolidate our discus throwing as well as our shot put throwing. And I believe the one time I went to the meet last year, the javelin throwing during competition was in that area as well. Generally, during practice, I believe they'll go up to this area to throw, which isn't an ideal place. We'd love to get a javelin runway. We'd love to get some spectator areas for that. I will say when we're doing this, we ribbon off areas. Sometimes you can't trust people with ribbons, especially when you're throwing discuses and you're throwing shot puts. We've only had one incident where someone ended up in an ambulance going there because they walked right through the ribbon and got hit with a discus. That's not a position we ever want anybody to be in. So we'd love to put up a short fence, but we also know that area right now, we can't do that, and we shouldn't do that along the way. So that's been something we would love to have our track and field, because some of those kids throw, some of those kids also run. And to be able to run practice, being able to do that back and forth. But as it is right now, and I also believe the drainage project as well took away some of our options to use some of this space because it was the major drainage area. It's okay, we know that's part of the community good that needed to be in there, but it did take some options away from us as far as grade and what to do. So if there's a possibility of the district being able to have those permanent areas where we could cage the discuses so they're only going in one direction instead of, slips out of a kid's hand, it can go a lot of different directions all along the way, right where our spectators are. I believe that's happened a time or two, and we've got by with it. But I'd really love to cage those off, so any errant throw like that would be protecting of spectators, as well as some fencing along the side, and as well as a javelin area too, because when people are throwing javelins too, I like to have lines and be able to stand back. It's harder for a javelin to go way, way, way off course, but when they're ribbons, sometimes people don't follow those, especially young kids that are there to watch brother do something, and they're parked the car and they'll run right through that field. And it doesn't matter that you're throwing javelins. Not a good spot to be. No one's been, I haven't heard of any incidents along that outside of the one from discus or other things that didn't result with any injuries. But the school district would be interested if it's possible. We've gave the input during the meetings that if it's possible on any parts of the property all along the way, we're interested in doing that and being a partner, working forward with any entity. But right now, I'll just express my appreciation to both the city and the county for them allowing us to use those different areas to be able to run those programs. Otherwise, we'd be busing kids all over the place during track season to be able to pull that off. So I'll defer. If my board members have anything further, go.
No, we're looking at that west side there, which is county property, but as Mr. Reed said, over on that east side where the skate park currently is, my understanding is that skate park could be relocated. On the concept from 2017, it shows some paved parking there. I don't know specifically what the ballot said with regard to parking, but I would be in favor of leaving that as a green area, which could be used throughout the year for different things, little kids, t-ball practice, whatever, ultimate frisbee. And that, again, that would be something maybe the district could work on with the city if the west side would not be feasible, that we could maybe look and see what could be done on that east side. But
we'd definitely be open to that, because that skate park does sit on technically district property, even though the city's been running it for quite a while. Yep. So we're interested in those options or any other option that we could pull off on that property format.
So the city is not interested in putting in 20 feet wide culverts on that to help with the drainage, because we don't want to speed up the water going out. We want to slow it down. My thinking is we could put in these underground culverts, then you could have nice flat green spaces above the area east of Bishop down and through there that you could maybe create a javelin tossing area. But we don't want the water going faster and get out of there. We want it to go slower, right?
Yeah, the detention basins that are there today are intended to actually capture that water and hold it for a period of time and slowly meter it out so that we don't have that fast rush of water causing that erosion downstream. We've already talked with our design team about the need for additional detention, which we hope to incorporate with a potential synthetic turf field. So when you design a synthetic turf field, you have the turf on the top, and then underneath it you have a lot of rock. And there are ways to design that to have the rock hold water. And I think some of the improvements recently done at MHS are done with that in mind, to use that area as detention. It's excavation and rock we're already going to be doing with the project. It's not that much more costly to make that handle the stormwater that we need. Other areas, could potentially be improved with other means of detention to create more space. I don't know what that would look like, but I think we're open to working with the district to, find space where these other types of activities could occur, and then how they're funded and how they're constructed, whether that's part of the city's project or a future project would need to be determined. But our consultants are looking at options for how to incorporate the throwing areas into the master plan for that piece of the site.
Okay, very good.
And we're definitely willing to pay for our end if there's things we need to do along the way. I know there's not a lot of public demand for javelin runways. There's probably not a lot of public demand for discus and shot put areas. We understand that's a school thing too, but we'd be happy to work with you guys on that. Maybe John wants to throw it, I don't know.
I was thinking axe throwing, if you maybe incorporate that into it along with it.
That's not a Acacia
Possibly
sport
work,
yet,
but yeah.
but maybe we could put in for it.
Yeah, I was just curious though, would that particular area give you enough to do all that, or would you still need to move one or more of those to another location?
That the east area,
Yeah,
just to lay down their spot. I'd rather have a professional do it, but we kind of have some
Sure.
sketches of a overlay of a current and kind of copy and paste and put on, and it's pretty tight, but it's there. I think you can do it more safely. than
fortunately
do it
for
right
you, I've got
now.
an engineer I work with whose kids are, yeah, okay, you probably.
I think there's some vested interest by some engineers in town to be happy to help with
Okay,
things
okay.
like that.
That's where we used to throw years ago.
Yeah. And we do have one.
I'm just having a hard time.
I'll say one more
picturing it, but
thing.
Then again, I don't throw javelin, so what do I know
Yeah,
anyway?
there is a little shot put ring in there, and people have asked me why we don't do that. I can tell you we've had at least 3 shot putters that would have put those shot puts right on the track. In my time here, in 9 years, and a shot put rolling onto a track is not good for the track. It's not good for anybody on the track. So unfortunately, we have some tremendous athletes that would push the end of that. So that's why we don't use that area.
A slight tidbit about the baseball fields, though, if you look at the concept, we have the baseball, the 2 larger ones sort of on that east side, and I remember way back in my day, Lonnie Clark hitting one out of the park that landed on Kimball, so a suggestion there might be to bring those more in, facing into CiCo as opposed to out, but that was the only other comment I had.
I wonder, Wyatt, the city has already done quite a bit of work with drainage in CiCo. Is there more that has to be done? Are we going to be, and would we use that sales tax money for that when,
So
I could see a lot of money in drainage?
as the park sits today, no, there's not additional needed for what's there today. As we do our project, if we're adding impervious surface, which synthetic turf, even though it sucks the water down through the rock layer, is still considered actually impervious. It actually is, because the water doesn't stay there, it flows out. It doesn't soak into the ground like a grass field. So if we pave parking lots, if we have synthetic turf, if we add any kind of structure, for new concessions, new restrooms, those type of things, those are all impervious. We will have to account for that water, that new stormwater runoff, and potentially find increased detention. The other thing is that if our improvements encroach into the existing basins, we remove some of that storage capacity, and we will have to make that up. So obviously, we know stormwater drainage and detention, that infrastructure is expensive, and so our team is trying to find ways to minimize that cost and not add pipes and things where we don't need them, but we will need to account for any increased runoff that our project creates.
How much turf are you planning? Like you've mentioned the buildings as impervious. Are we turfing 3 ball fields? What is it we're going to be turfing?
We haven't fully determined that yet. The the sales tax question didn't specify,
Right.
a certain number of fields. And so part of our discussion with the advisory committee is, how would we prioritize that? Would we do one fully turf one field? Would we try to do infields on all the fields like we've done it at Twin Oaks at Annaberg Park? Should we try to do more than one field? And a lot of that's going to be driven by budget. Some of that may be driven by the types of activities we want to have on those fields, whether it's MHS athletics or park and rec programs. Turf gives us an assurance that we can play, rain or shine, that those fields will be dry enough to play even shortly after a rain, whereas a dirt infield or even a grass outfield, if we get enough rain at the wrong time, we might have to cancel the game or cancel the tournament. Those are benefits we've seen since we turfed at Annaberg. We've been able to have a lot more of those events and not cancel as many. So I think we'll be coming back to the commission with a recommendation in May with what the committee thinks and based on the budget, what we think we can turf or what we need to do natural grass.
Thank you.
Okay, well, now we're into I guess we're into the county portion. So, who would like to speak first for the county? Gary, do you have something for us?
I don't have anything prepared. Do you want me to say a few things? I thought Nancy, since he's the lawyer, was going to tell us what was going on. But as you look at the map, and I keep hearing about cooperation, so we've got the school districts using the carnival grounds, and when the city wants to expand the parking lot or onto county ground. We've already got a city pool on county ground. It seems to me like all of the money that's been raised, congratulations for the foresight and the vote passage to do all the improvements that have been made, the rec centers and the money you've got coming to do the other things. I would remind everyone that every citizen in Manhattan and Riley County pays those sales taxes, and it's earmarked for those things, but there's no tax money for improving any part of the county portion of that. And so as I look at that, and you look at a great big parking lot that 383 uses mostly because the football field's there, they have track meets there, and that's also county property. And so I would just say that, part of the sharing would be if we wanted to have a cattle show on the football field someday, that, it kind of goes both ways. So sharing of the whole cooperation thing looks like it's mostly the county cooperating with the city and the school district. That's fine, it's a cooperative effort, and it is a community park. But I think there's also some things that, the extension of pavement onto county property west of the ball fields interferes with parking for livestock shows and rodeos and those kinds of things. And we could certainly use, some additional help from somewhere to improve Potterworth Hall, which is widely used by the community. Nearly every weekend of the year, the Lions Club just had a pancake feed, and that building needs a lot of help. So all I'm making the plea for is if, there's cooperation, we would like to do something to at least improve Potterworth Hall and make some other adjustments. That's really all I have to say.
Okay. Well, I have gone through and read all the background back from like the 60s. And, it's always been that each unit of government has been supposedly responsible for its own facilities within their area of the park. Park is like, I was surprised, I didn't realize it was so large. It's like 84 acres. And of that, the county owns 59.5 acres. The city has ownership of the smallest amount of acreage over there. So, we have had a fair board. We've had a lot of discussion about the fair and the facilities over there that really need some work. And we don't have a plan at this point. We're working on on some ideas, but I think myself and the other two commissioners are not wanting to at least pave the parking lot, or it's been really tough to find out what's going on with the planning here. So it's, I would like John or Greg, if you have some comments.
I guess from my perspective, you mentioned we own 59 point, whatever it is, 59.5 acres there. It's not a square, it's not a rectangle, so it's kind of difficult. It's more of a kind of an L that kind of stretches from Kimball and Avery there at the corner, and it kind of rounds, kind of coming all the way back around that kind of corner and comes all the way back up to Reith and Dickens there. I feel as if it's not really, that space is just not really adequately used really for anything at this particular point in time. And I feel, at least over the course of time anyway, and it's, as mentioned, we don't necessarily have a dedicated source of funds or grant money or anything that's stirred across that can actually do this at this point in time. So that's something you have to work on. But, something can kind of move or shift to make some things work. I don't know, Gary. I'm kind of at the point with Potroff Hall where I think it's probably lived its lifetime, and it's probably time to start thinking about a new facility, whether it's called Potroff Hall or anybody wants to step up and put a family name or something on it. Hey, I'm all game for that too. But I think those are the things that you're probably going to have to think of. But this wasn't something that was on our radar, or at least my radar. I'll be honest with you, it's not something that's the biggest of priorities. I think we have some other things that we need to work through, but I'm certainly willing to discuss it at this particular point in time because this has come up. But it's going to be kind of a slow, incremental, methodical type of process. I don't know how that works with everything else. I guess it's something that we have to discuss. I think if you were to shift some things to the south, I think that solves the problem with the parking lot over the course of time. Maybe the city's going to have to be a little bit patient with us on that. And I think maybe the bigger issue there is, where is that new entryway going to be at? And I naturally assume it's going to be at Candlewood there and Kimball, reaching back in, but I don't know exactly how that works, and I don't know if there's a way to make all of our needs work, maybe temporary. We got to work together to make something work for the fair or something like that. I don't know if that's a possibility along the way there. It's something that we can configure and make it work for a few years as we try to figure out what we're doing. I know Gary would probably agree with me. The barns have probably, I don't want to say maybe outlived their entire life cycle. I mean, maybe you can strip them down to just bare steel and come up with a different concept and maybe revitalize them in a way that's sufficient for the future. I don't know. That's something that just have to be figured out. I thought when you come down here to kind of Avery, we've got those two concrete shelters over there, kind of picnic areas. They don't seem to be a good fit in that particular location. They're kind of tucked into there to me. It seems like those might be a better fit to shift up to the playground area where it's a little bit more family oriented, for instance, just as an example of changes that could be made. The exercise equipment stuff that's down there, it's been down there for like 30-something years. I don't think it gets used. I think it was temporary at some point in time because it could be just pulled up. We've got better stuff at better locations. That's something that I don't know that we necessarily need, particularly if we're trying to reprioritize and reconfigure some things. There's some ways to do this. I don't know what that answer is at this point in time. It's a very primitive conversation for us. There's certainly something that could be done that fits and provides something for everybody along the way in that equation. We're just going to have to figure out what that is, and then we have to figure out how to make it work. So I guess that's my 2 cents soapbox, whatever you want to call it.
Greg, do you have anything?
There, okay. Kind of agreeing with what you're saying, that we're not sure what we're going to do yet. We don't want to tie anything down because we're still looking at, like I said, we did have someone look into it, seeing what the possibility of moving it, and that cost is out of line. We aren't even sure what the funding is to redo what's there now, but which considerably less than what it'd be to start over new. So that's kind of what we're looking for now, but we're still in the process of figuring out what needs to be done And that's why, we're not trying to be difficult, but we're still working on our portion of it too.
Well, I think it's come out that we don't want to pave that parking lot on the county side. And I think, you know, we've talked about that, Wyatt, because it is used for livestock and during the fair and during other times of the year. So that, at least that's something we've talked about it at length. And I know Clancy has advised us on some of that. So. But that, at least in the planning stages, you probably need to take paving that parking lot off of the county park and leave it as it is.
I have just a question for probably more directed at the county commissioners out of this conversation, because there's 3 entities involved, but the setup is a little bit different. So for clarity's sake on my end of it, from the school district perspective, we've got the school board, and then we have Mr. Reed and perhaps the athletic director, Mr. Marsh, are kind of the most intensely involved. On the city end of it, there's the city commission, and then there's Wyatt. At the county level, is there a staff member? Is there, I mean, because there's a little bit of me that says this was passed in 2017. This is not, at least in our world, not been on our radar. And it sounds to me like what we're hearing from the county commissioners is that it hasn't been on your radar. And there's just some disconnect there. And I understand that has to do with the cycle of elections and who was on county commission at the time and who staff is and so forth. But my question is, as we go forward with this process, who is the appropriate people at the county commission level or at the county level for us to be having these conversations with, so that, because we're not going to be able to resolve these issues today, obviously, or in a format that's this large. You know, we need to whittle down to who are the people that need to be sitting at the table.
Right.
And so I would ask for some clarity on that part, not only for the city or for the school board perspective on it, but as we're giving feedback to Wyatt today, who does he come back to at the county level for more clarification? How does he proceed? So
No, I think that's a good point, because we went over in our briefing the gravel parking lot and how, okay, we heard that from the county. And so when we have our team together that's working on this, the consultants are going to have to take that into consideration when they work on the plan. But that's a good point, is they're taking into consideration, who do they go to say, okay, what about this little section, or what about that? That's what we need.
I think that's probably a conversation that's probably going to have to come direct to us at some particular point in time. And I know Wyatt and I have had conversation about maybe doing that on a monthly basis, or as those conversations come up and those particular decisions need to be made at the city level with that input in mind. That's something that could be hashed out pretty quick and pretty easily.
Okay. Dave, you had something?
Well, I have a lot.
Oh, yeah, well.
First off, thanks for the opportunity and the invitation to speak to you. I caught you express, the disconnect. And this is, I like to think that this meeting kind of came across as a result of something that had been discussed at the Rodney County Task Force for fairground renovations, expansion, whatever the case may be, which I'm a member of. We've had several meetings over the last several months, and we've talked about a number of things. We did have a visit at the intergovernmental meeting here. I know that Wyatt came and made a presentation to our task force, and that got a couple of people thinking, we didn't know about this, we didn't know about that. And so what our hope as a task force was that to get everybody talking and make sure we're all on the same page with some of these things, because there seemed to be some collision of ideas there that weren't commonly held. And I hope that this helps with that process today. On behalf of the task force, we looked at a number of different things. We've got on the task force, it was established by the county commission. We have a broad cross-section of people from lot of stakeholders within the task force that have interests in what's going on with the fairgrounds. The current fairground status, as Gary had mentioned just a moment ago, Otter Fall is an old facility, tired facility that probably needs more renovations than it costs to make it worth its while. The Riley County Fair itself is very limited on what it can do. The rodeo grounds, the Cow Valley Rodeo Association is concerned about its growth. Their goal is to make this rodeo one of the top 5 in the state of Kansas. They can't do that with the current facility. There's a lot of things that come into play with the county portion of CiCo Park that are being utilized by the fair and other entities. There's been an effort over the years of, in the county when it started purchasing land to build its county park development out northwest of town on Highway 24. There's about 40 acres of land there roughly that had been kind of noted as a potential location or relocation for the Riley County Fairgrounds. There has been some work that, and Carter, you asked about the county. The county does have a Parks Director, it's under the Public Works Director. I don't know how much engagement there has been there, other than, I know that John Exelman's here, he's the Public Works Director, he's been involved in some of our discussions as well. But there's a lot of land out of that location that if the fairgrounds were to relocate there, it would allow for a lot of growth of not only the fair, but a lot of opportunity for other agriculturally based events. I think that Riley County has the potential to seize upon an opportunity to develop that long-term into a place where we could have 45 to 50 events that would be almost, not just local, but statewide events on a regular basis. We had a study that was done through the Chamber of the Convention Visitors Bureau that would indicate that if we were to develop a facility out there that would allow for greater agriculturally based events out there and community events as well, that with the association with Kansas State University in our community, that it would draw a lot of people, especially with ag interests, to have their events here, whatever that show may be. It could be an equipment show, it could be a livestock show, it could be a lawn and garden show. There's all kinds of opportunities out there. And some of this also kind of comes into play. Well, there's a part of the plan, a proposal plan that included an indoor arena that could seat several thousand people. That could be a location for a lot of different things. And so the task force looked at this. We also looked at everything that we currently have at CiCo Park. The concern of the task force is this: yes, we'd like to see something much larger. We think that the economic return would be tremendous for our community. We've got the studies that show that it would be. But there's this thing called money. And that is, that could be a project that could be anywhere from, depending on what is built, and it could be done gradually, 20 to 40 to 60, $80 million. That's going to be hard in our current world to come up with that much money to make that transition. And if there was a transfer of the county fairgrounds, what would CiCo Park look like if the county were to vacate that property? And if we can, I don't know legally that we can by the original agreements that were established, for the foundation of the park in the 1960s. But that, with the county vacating that property that is essentially used for fairgrounds or relocating, that would operate or open up a lot of opportunities, I think, for some of the things that the school district has that's inspired to do, that the city would like to be able to do. So there's just so many moving parts with all of this. But the task force seemed to think that, boy, this would really be nice, but the reality is, the financial aspect. In order to renovate the fairgrounds as it is, to make improvements to Potterworth Hall, to some of the barns, it'll still run into several $1 million. don't really have an idea exactly, $10 to $20 million, one way or the other. There's going to be some costs. That part needs to be done, but it doesn't necessarily allow for the opportunity that an agricultural events facility would provide. It doesn't allow for the Kaw Valley Rodeo to grow to their goals. One of the things that we are restricted with the county fair is what size of carnival can we bring in? If you were out at the county fair at any time over the summer, there's a lot of people there that came through. It is a big attraction. Many people have said, well, we're going to move it out of town. It's 5 minutes from Kimball and Southchild to get there, which is not significant. You may not be able to get your Link scooter out there, but you might be able to I mean, there's a lot of ways. You might be surprised, maybe you can expand those limitations. But I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for that potential. There's also the reality of what needs to be done. There's a lot of improvements that need to be done. And I think that it's just very important for all of us to be mindful of what all three entities have at stake and what their goals are respectively. So I think it's great to have this discussion, to approach it with maybe an open mind and a little bit of vision down the road. Where that vision takes us, I think that is something that we're going to need to establish some leadership, and maybe another organization can kind of take the reins and pursue that possibility. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have on behalf of the task force.
Yeah, Dave, how has the task force thought about, how could you gradually move the fair? How would that look? Gradually move different facilities?
There'd be an awful lot of groundwork, and John, I don't know if you've even approached this or not, but we haven't really discussed about that kind of transition.
I mean, just
among
in
the things that we
general.
talked about were other locations, including Fairmont Park. There'd be some traffic situations. The rodeo people did not like that idea at all because of, it being low, and, I know you can get rid of mosquitoes in a large scale, but, that's an issue down there. But, there's a lot of traffic issues there as well. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you. But I was responding to a question. Does that count?
You weren't even on the agenda.
I was invited.
We recognized it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think your country,
9 minutes left, county, or USD, the school district has about 6 minutes left, county has 8 minutes. If you want to use it, you're not obligated.
Okay. School district.
This is a conversation I haven't been a part of. I'm not one of the board members who sits on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. I heard Wyatt's presentation at Intergovernmental, and we've discussed it briefly at our Facilities and Growth meeting. The one thing I've heard from the community is the desire to solve the javelin throwing issue. I've had several parents contact me afraid that we're going to have a major safety issue. I guess the question I have, given this conversation, is Wyatt, is with the what was approved in 2017, do we have to spend the money? Do we have to be on this aggressive timeline? I guess what's driving this to have to start by next summer? Or are required to by the way it was written?
So our approach with the sales tax project has been to pay as we go. And so we sequenced the projects in such a way that we collected the revenue. We could then pay for the project without incurring debt on the projects. So we're at a position now where we were comfortable proceeding with the CiCo project based on the current revenue collected and the projected over the next year and a half. So we're under an obligation currently to work through conceptual and schematic design with our consultant team, and they're obligated to bring a guaranteed maximum price proposal to the commission by May. Whether the city commission chooses to accept that proposal and move on to the phase 2 to finish design and construct the project will be up to them at that time. I think our interest would be to have continuity in that design process and to continue. Obviously, we would be under the majority of the construction wouldn't occur until 2025. Well, with opening in 26. I think BHS has some other scenarios for scheduling that they haven't quite shared with us yet, but that's been the approach up to this point, is that we would open in spring of 26 for baseball season. I guess that would be a discussion with the commission about and other stakeholders about whether or not there's a desire to delay something. I don't know if we did that, I would wonder what the trigger would be to re-engage with the process. I do think the city has an obligation to deliver on the voter-approved tax, and so I think we need to be mindful of that. But
Yeah, I think from the city perspective, we have to fulfill our commitment. I mean, you said this was 2017, was voted on, the whole community knew about it. I'd be hard pressed to tell a citizen, no, we're not going to have that completed in time, like we should according to the schedule. And I still, we're still in the planning stages. I think we can work in anything we need to get worked in to make sure that's, feasible. Obviously I'm speaking for myself as a commissioner and knows who's going to be here, but I think any city commission would be hard pressed to delay it.
Yeah, and I agree. Like we had a softball tournament, I guess, canceled here just a couple of weeks ago because the restrooms don't work in the sewer system, and a decision was made not to repair it because we're planning on renovating the whole place, and it made no sense to redo the sewer line and then dismantle it all 6 months later. So I think we've got to stick with that timeline, and if we can do it faster, that would be even better, because people have been interested in using those ball fields. And I don't really have a problem with, any of the other, the school board needing to put in track facilities. If they can get with our team and say, okay, here's where we want to put it, and as long as you fund it, then maybe we can get some cooperation, cheaper price with the contractor. But to me, that's what the connection is. But as far as the city focus is, we're 100% focused on fixing those ball fields. And the parking lot's never been an issue with me. It can stay gravel. That's fine. We just draw the line and say, great, that saves us some money. We can use the funds for something else. But I would think if that track facility is possible, then the school board should look at the location and then just coordinate, with our team, so that if we do let a contract and you want to pay for some additional stuff, and we can save some money, fine. That's not going to violate, the city agreement with the voters. And then the business with the fairgrounds, that's sort of off the table for this project. I mean, that's another discussion, and I've seen some of those plans, but the citizens need to realize that, this CiCo Park improvements is really just the CiCo Park ball fields, and we did say the 12 tennis courts, which the school agreed to, and that was specifically the language, on the ballot. And I think it also said trails, and that's a little bit vague. And we talk about, trail connections. There was a little bit of money set aside for that, but that could be pathways, walkways, sidewalks, things like that, so.
I do have one question in terms of the ball fields. We keep saying 4, but as it stands right now, there's technically 5. What are we going to do with poor old Pluto Field?
so Pluto is our extra water feature at CiCo at certain
It's probably full of water right now as
times
we
of
speak,
year.
probably, yes.
The 2017 concept explored removing Pluto Field. It is used for some programs. I think that the thought from Parks and Recreation is that those younger kids could play on a larger field and with temporary fences potentially, or we could accommodate them at either the new fields or other fields in the community. So I think we're proceeding as if that field is eliminated with this project, and then the space would be repurposed for either larger or reconfigured of the other 4 ball fields and other potential amenities such as batting cages or other picnic shelter, kind of spectator type amenities. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to work through with the steering committee and the design team, and ultimately come up with a new layout for what that area would look like.
Wyatt just finished off the school district's time. The city has still 9 minutes. County still has 8 minutes.
I'd just like to say, just from my perspective, that I I think what the city is planning is just on the city's property. So I don't think we're talking about anything on county or school district, are we?
The,
Tennis courts,
Well, yeah, 'cause we have the group.
yeah. Are we, what remains, what do we have to do to move forward? We have an okay to do that from the school district? Are we?
so the question was, are we intending to make improvements on non-city property?
Yeah.
And what would we need to do to make that happen? The 2017 concept showed paving a portion of the parking lot on the county's property west of the ball fields and into the grassy field. It also showed improvements to the tennis courts, and I think some of the ball fields may extend onto USD 383 property, and parking improvements on both city and USD 383 property along Reef to serve those new athletic facilities. Then there is a small piece of county property between the existing tennis courts and Robinson Drive that is county property. And I believe the 2017 concept showed tennis courts encroaching across that line as well. As we explore options to design all of those things, we're keeping those property lines in mind. We will open and welcome to feedback from the governing bodies about your comfort level with city's improvements on your property. We recognize it's Riley County and USD 383 property. We do have long-standing agreements with both entities for various amenities that are city constructed and city managed. The skate park, the tennis courts, the pool, all of those were agreements between past commissions and the respective commission and the board to construct and maintain those. So we would envision needing to execute new agreements to update those. Obviously, if we remove the existing tennis courts, we need a new agreement to govern the new ones. If the skate park stays, I think it could stay under our current agreement. We are having conversations about either renovating it or removing it and converting that space for some other amenity, whether that be parking or green space or javelin throwing areas or whatnot. Those are things we need to determine. But we intend to come back to to all the governing bodies and seek those agreements or easements that would be needed to facilitate construction or use. And hopefully we can have continued dialogue over the next 6 months or so that we're not coming to you with a final plan that assumes something on your property that you're not aware of. That's not our goal or intent. We don't want to surprise anyone with a final drawing that we then have to scrap because you disagree. So that's why I like this meeting. I'm glad we're having these conversations, and I'm open to continued conversations so that we can narrow in on exactly what our goals and what we intend to build. But the recent history from 2017 was that the school district was very much on board with the type of improvements we were talking about occurring on district property, based on the idea that MHS Athletics would consolidate to these new facilities, and we would continue that partnership there. The conversations with the county have probably changed a little bit. There were no decisions made in 2017, but there were conversations and acknowledgement about some improvements that could occur on county property. If that's not true today, then we'll navigate that as we move through the process and continue that dialogue.
I just know that I moved here in 1974, and CiCo Park was this wonderful park, ball games all the time, and it really was built for the future. It's kind of like City Park was at one time, reached out beyond the city, and CiCo and Annaberg reached out, and the community has grown around it. But CiCo is now, seems to me, pretty crowded, and so we have to, think further out, as Dave said, and be more, develop a new vision, and I think this is part of the process. I think just getting us to talk to each other is the important part. And I don't know I don't know what's next, I guess.
Well, I know for me, I moved out here in the summer of 1986, and for probably the process of 3, probably 4 summers, I was either at CiCo Pool or the Ball Diamonds myself. And while I'm going to be sad to see those go, because I've got lots and lots of memories there, I too would like to see a future generation be able to have those same set of memories in some way, shape, or form. So it is still important, and I do think that CiCo Park still has the ability to accomplish that from all 3 sides in some way, shape, or form. And I do think it's important to try to get to that point however we can. But I don't think we're all on that same line just right yet, and I think it's going to take some time to do that. We're going to have to continue to converse to get there. So may take a couple more of these conversations. I don't know, but
Seems like county funding is what
basically
has to happen.
Basically for us, I mean,
The school
we have to do a bond issue for anything that we're going to do. We're not going to be able to do it in form of sales tax. State doesn't really allow for that. I mean, it's a statutory, list of things, and these type of projects, to my knowledge, aren't on there unless you actually go and convene the legislature themselves for a particular project. And I'm not going to be too hopeful probably on that one. So we don't have that same process as the city does on that.
Might be a can of worms.
Yeah, I think for something like what we're talking about with CiCo Park, yeah, it's gonna have to be a kind of a phased incremental thing that we kind of build up too much like we did with Public Works out there. You either have to buy the property, which we don't have to do in this case, and then, you figure out what the priority here is. Maybe it's Potroff Hall at this point in time, and we have to figure out, does it still work in its current location, its current site, or do we need to add on to it, or do we need to just scrap that and go to a different location and come up with Potroff Hall 2.0 or whatever, and then one by one figure out what goes along with it, and that could take several years or a process of 3 to 5 years. And we've done that in the past, and we've done that within the constraints of our current budget, and I think that's a real possibility. It'll take some time and some planning and some work, but I think we have those entities both internally with the county and within the community that could definitely help us develop that plan. But it's slow, it's incremental, and it's going to probably be methodical, and it may not match up with everything else, so we'd have to ask for patience on that. So and Clancy's probably getting ready to tell me my time's up.
Yeah, and there is a lot of, a lot of space over on the south side that could be utilized. There's a sled hill that I don't think anybody uses anymore. And
We don't get any snow.
Yeah.
Maybe Sunday finally, I don't know.
But there's a lot of space on the south side that the county owns, that possibly we could move some things around and not encroach on the other entities' properties. And I live close to Annenberg, and it's really close to CiCo, and there's some great ball fields over there, and probably some room for expansion too. I know that this is a particular project here, but we need to kind of figure out what we're doing as a county. It is valuable property. We have discussed at one point about selling it. But that isn't necessarily the best way to go, so it could happen.
And I think the thing with that too is I think the city's vision is still to keep it a park. If you were using it for some other space or something like that, that might be a difference. So, if your intent is to kind of keep it the same, but to revitalize it and use it for the same purpose, but for the future, why shouldn't the rest of us at least try to keep that same vision and do what we're doing? I've had several people say, well, fairgrounds should be rural and it should be out, and I get that. That's probably, there's some sense, but we wouldn't be the only community still that does that. I believe Ellis County, for instance, their fairgrounds is still in the city of Hayes. There's several other communities that do something similar. Don't have to go along specifically with every single county in status quo. So, we got to do what fits, we got to do what makes sense, we got to do what's within our, fiscal constraints at this particular point in time too. And maybe some of the other things that discussed will miraculously happen, or maybe we'll get maybe somebody will win the lottery, and that's the direction they'll want to go, and I'll be perfectly fine with that too, but that's just not where we're at, so we've got to be realistic as well.
County down to about 2 minutes, county, city has 4 minutes. Or you could announce 2 minutes.
It's 5:04, we're on overtime.
This is Ron. I appreciate the discussion this afternoon, and look forward to working through the processes that we have to do the improvements that the voters have identified, and certainly willing to talk about other aspects along the way. So thank you.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Okay, then we can adjourn.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.